Welcome back to Nation of Glory. Tonight, we open the doors to a world where the flicker of a candle can cast shadows that dance like living ghosts, where the sound of a creaking floorboard can send a chill down your spine, and where the power of a single imagination has turned millions of young readers into lovers of mystery, fear, and adventure. This is not just a story about an author. This is the journey of a man who built a kingdom of fright, whose words have wrapped themselves around the minds of generations, pulling them into pages they could never put down. This is the life of Robert Lawrence Stine, the man the world would come to know as R.L. Stine. He was born on October 8, 1943, in the small town of Columbus, Ohio. The world he entered was modest, a far cry from the sprawling fantasy worlds he would one day create. His family lived in a simple house on East North Broadway, where laughter and hard work mixed with the quiet struggles of everyday life. Bob, as his family called him, didn't grow up with smartphones, video games, or streaming movies. Instead, he had something far more powerful, a restless imagination. And that imagination was always hungry. From the start, he was a quiet boy. He wasn't the type to stand in the spotlight or command a room with a booming voice. He preferred corners, quiet hallways, and the company of his own thoughts. At the age of 9, fate slipped into his life in the form of an old typewriter he found in his attic. The keys were stiff, the ribbon worn, but to young Bob, it was a treasure chest. He carried it to his room, set it down on a small desk, and began to type. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, that soft click of keys, was the first step into a career that would change the lives of millions. At first, his stories weren't about ghosts or monsters. They were silly, funny, filled with talking animals and impossible adventures. But hidden in the folds of his humor was a fascination with the strange. He loved comic books and old horror films. Saturday afternoons were often spent in the glow of a black and white television, watching movies where shadows moved like they had minds of their own. Something about that feeling, the excitement, the tension, stuck with him. But life in Columbus was not always easy. Money was tight. His father worked for a shipping company, his mother stayed home, and every dollar had to stretch. Bob didn't have piles of toys or shelves of new books, so he created his own worlds. Pages became windows, and through them, he saw places no one else could. While other kids played outside, Bob was often indoors, clacking away at that old typewriter, inventing characters who lived far more exciting lives than he did. In school, he wasn't the star athlete or the popular kid. He wasn't the one teachers predicted would be famous. But he had one thing that set him apart: persistence. He wrote every single day, not because someone told him to, but because he couldn't stop. Writing became as natural as breathing. By the time he reached college at Ohio State University, Bob had found his rhythm. He joined the school's humor magazine, The Sundial, and began to explore his voice as a writer. At the time, humor was his home turf. Fear, horror, and the eerie worlds he would one day master were still waiting in the shadows. After graduation, he moved to New York City, chasing the dream of making a living as a writer. New York was loud, crowded, and intimidating, but it was also a place of opportunity. Bob started small, writing joke books and funny stories for kids. His big break in horror hadn't arrived yet. But every project, no matter how small, was a brick in the foundation he was building. He learned the business, learned the deadlines, and learned what it meant to work hard even when the world wasn't watching. Then, in the early 1990s, something shifted. The market for children's horror was almost non-existent, and that was exactly why Bob saw potential. He had an idea. What if there was a book series that could make kids feel the same thrill he felt watching those old horror films? What if he could blend suspense, mystery, and just enough fright to make the pages impossible to turn slowly? That idea became Goosebumps. The first Goosebumps book, Welcome to Dead House, was published in 1992. It wasn't just a success, it was a spark that set the literary world on fire. Kids devoured the stories. They talked about them in classrooms, passed them under desks, and read them under blankets with flashlights. R.L. Stine had tapped into something rare, a perfect balance of fear and fun that made young readers hungry for more. Goosebumps grew into a phenomenon. Every month, a new title hit the shelves, each cover a work of eerie art that practically dared you to open it. The books spread across the globe, translated into dozens of languages, selling over 400 million copies worldwide. They became the second best-selling book series in history. But for Stine, it wasn't about numbers. It was about connection. Letters poured in from children who had never finished a book before, Goosebumps, who discovered the magic of reading because of his words. Behind this success was a man who still saw himself as that quiet boy in Columbus, tapping on a typewriter in his room. Fame didn't change him. He stayed grounded, still working every day, still telling stories with the same passion as when he was 9 years old. He wrote with a simple goal: to entertain, to spark imagination, and to give young readers a place where they could escape. But Stine's journey wasn't without challenges. Trends in publishing shifted, critics questioned whether his books were too scary for kids, and markets evolved. Yet, like the heroes in his stories, he adapted. He expanded into television, turning Goosebumps into a hit series that brought his nightmares to life on screen. His stories became part of childhood for entire generations. Their echoes still felt today. Decades passed, and while other trends came and went, R.L. Stine's legacy only grew stronger. He continued to write, never losing the spark that started it all. For him, storytelling was not just a career, it was a calling. He understood something vital, that fear, when crafted with care, is not about terrorizing. It's about thrilling. It's about showing young readers they can face the unknown and come out smiling. From that small house in Columbus to the shelves of millions of homes around the world, Robert Lawrence Stine's journey is proof that the quietest voices can sometimes speak the loudest. His words have traveled across oceans, across languages, across time itself, and they continue to inspire. Even now, somewhere, a child is turning the page of a Goosebumps book, heart racing, eyes wide, mind alive with possibilities. And maybe, just maybe, that child will one day find an old typewriter in an attic and decide to tell their own stories. Robert Lawrence Stine didn't just write books. He built a world and invited all of us inside. And for that, his name will forever stand in the history of storytelling. Thanks for watching. This has been Nation of Glory. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that inspire, move, and keep you listening until the very last word.